I'd like to take the roll call of our Affordable Housing Committee members. My name is Hector Cruz, the chairperson. Beth Shea Bryant.
Present.
Stephen Trotto.
He is here, but he's having some technical difficulties with the audio.
Okay. Kristen Loss.
Present.
And Mo DiPaolo.
Present.
Okay. Going over the board minutes, has everyone had an opportunity to review them? And are there any comments, issues, or concerns? Member minutes as presented.
I'll move to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yay.
Aye.
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 Okay, so moved.
Steve, that's a lot better. We can see you now. You're on mute, but if you want to unmute, we can make sure we can hear you.
Or you can wave.
You still have to click the unmute button.
So any item number 3 on the agenda, any board member comments? No. I know that there was just one item. I know that we had at the previous meeting, and that was the conflict of interest acknowledgement receipt. For those that have not done so, they can just complete the form, and what I was told is you can drop it in the box out front of the town hall, where you drop off the bills, and they'll take care of the rest for you. Well, moving on to item number 4, review and approve the Affordable Housing Trust annual report. Brian, do you was that I didn't see that posted in the shared drive? I might have missed it.
Mr. Chairman, I can double check on that it was there. I thought I had uploaded it. But just to explain briefly, Mr. Chairman, to the members of the Affordable Housing Trust Committee. So every year, if you've seen those booklets that come out in town, is the annual town report, and it has the report of all the different boards in town and committees, as well as departments. So as one of the latest ones to join that esteemed group is the Affordable Housing Trust. So typically what happens is town staff will draft the annual report for the board and committee, and then run it by said board or committee for any feedback, suggestions, anything we might have missed, something you thought of. Obviously, with only one meeting under our belt so far, the Affordable Housing Trust, there wasn't too much to say. I provided some historical background just for the year for anyone in the future looking at this past year's record for the Affordable Housing Trust. So if it wasn't up there, my apologies. I did think I got it up, but that's okay. You still have a couple weeks. If you see anything, have a suggestion, please reach out directly to me in my office, and we'll gladly talk about it with you. And if it's something small, we will make sure we reach out to the members and just let them know that we're probably add it or change it, and that's fine. Okay, so tonight we were just looking for kind of a stamp of approval on or to hear any comments, but there's no requirement for the Housing Trust to necessarily vote on it if you don't wish to.
Okay, so we'll table that for our March 2nd meeting.
It's not in the drive, but I believe Mr. Cahill sent it to us on January 27th at 4:18 p.m. if people have access to their email. And I can pop it on over to the drive now.
January 27th. Okay. All right, yep, I found it. Great, so we'll table that one. Item 5, we have Shelley Goring from Massachusetts Housing Partnership. I've had the pleasure to work closely with the organization in my previous career. For those that don't know of the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, they're a statewide public nonprofit that supports and finances affordable housing, including home ownership. They also have resources available to help in the development and planning of projects and support with grants and technical assistance. And with that said, want to introduce Shelley from MHP. Welcome.
Great, fantastic. Thanks so much. I am Shelley Goring with MHP, Mass Housing Partnership, and I'm going to try to share my screen here. So can you see that, the slides?
Yes.
Yep, that's okay. Fantastic. So I'm here. Well, first I should say congratulations on getting your trust up and running and the trustees appointed. It's fantastic to hear. And tonight I'm just going to go through some information about Affordable Housing Trust, what they are, what they can do, some best practices, some suggestions that we make from after working in a lot of communities around the state, and then go through the kinds of activities that you could be a part of and that you could be funding. And I want to keep this open as a conversation. Feel free to raise your hand or just to intercept if you have a question, or if I'm going too fast, feel free. It doesn't have to just wait until the end. I'm perfectly fine with some interruptions for conversation or questions. And if that's where you want to raise your hand, or if Mr. Chairman, if you want to help kind of manage that, feel free to interrupt me. So Mr. Chairman did give a little bit of an overview of MHP. We are focused on increasing the supply of affordable housing around the state. And we have what I think of as 4 legs to our stool. We have the community assistance team, which is what I'm a part of. And we do technical assistance in really working on the community level. We lend to support the creation and preservation of affordable housing. So we've lent over $1 billion that has supported over 22,000 units of affordable housing. We really focus, our niche is affordable rental housing. We have the One Mortgage, which is the most affordable mortgage product in Massachusetts. It's a unique Massachusetts product for households earning up to 100% of the area median income. So we have a home ownership team that manages that program. These mortgages are received through traditional lenders, but MHP manages the back of the house because there is some additional subsidy for households earning up to 80% of the area at median income. And then our newest team is the Center for Housing Data. So we have a small group of folks that are collecting, analyzing, and distributing data to help inform housing policy on the local, regional, and state level. So my team specifically we're really about trying to build capacity on the local level to be supporting affordable housing. And we also work with housing authorities as well as nonprofit organizations. We have a variety of different kinds of trainings all through the year. And of course, more recently, it's been virtual. We do a lot of technical assistance around pre-development work. If you have a municipal site that you're interested in using for affordable housing, we may be able to help you do some initial pre-development work or write the request for proposals. We do zoning work and, like I said, work with housing authorities. And then my work is, a lot of my work is really focused on housing trusts and helping communities not only establish municipal affordable housing trusts, but then also helping to support trustees once you're appointed. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about what a housing trust is, a municipal affordable housing trust, and then a little bit about operations and best practices, and then eligible activities. I know that you have, each of you have a differing experience and understanding of what a trust is. So I'm sorry if I am saying anything that feels too basic to you. I just don't want to make any assumptions. So as you very likely know, your trust is organized under Chapter 44, Section 55C of the Mass General Law. It is a public entity, so it's a municipal board. It's created by your local legislative body. The purpose is fairly narrow. It's to create and preserve affordable housing for low and moderate income households. And it's led by your local board of trustees. Because you're a municipal entity, you are subject to public procurement, designer selection, conflict of interest, and public meeting laws. So just keep that in mind as you're considering hiring consultants, etc. Very broadly, your trust can address local affordable housing needs. You can support local control of housing initiatives. You're able to engage in the real estate market, buying and selling property if that makes sense for your group. You can make timely decisions because once funds are in your account, you don't have to go to town meeting. You can make decisions of how to use your funds. And then as a municipal entity, you can be collecting funds from a variety of sources, which we'll get into the sources that communities are relying on in Massachusetts. So the statute says a minimum of 5 members, that a select board member must be a part of that team at all times. The board is appointed by your select board 2-year terms, and then you are considered public agents or special municipal employees, similar to your other boards. Of course, you want to become familiar with your own bylaw that was written for Shrewsbury, because there are some specific requirements around trustees and also powers. So if you haven't read through your bylaw, you want to do that and have it handy, just to make sure that you're all understanding how Shrewsbury expects you to be operating. So there are the state statute has a variety of board powers. And then I really want to bring attention to this, that Shrewsbury has a variety of modifications with these powers. So just be careful that you don't go to the state statute and expect that that's how you can operate. You really want to pay attention to your bylaw. So for example, if you haven't read through your bylaw, specifically in Shrewsbury, it requires that in order to incur debt or to borrow, that you cannot exceed 80% of your assets in your borrowing. Purchase or sales require 2/3 of trustees. So I just want to point you to your bylaw to make sure that you're reading that and being well rehearsed. And as we work in communities all across the state, dozens of communities that have affordable housing trusts, at this point, our count is that about 127 communities have affordable housing trusts. And just during the pandemic, we've seen about 17 communities create trusts. So particularly in the last couple of years, year and a half, communities are seeing a real need to create this kind of infrastructure locally. So from our vantage point, it's not rocket science, but it really takes having some funds available for your trust to work with, having a vision of your place in the community and what you're working towards, having leadership that can help move projects forward, and then transparency, being open in the community about what you're doing. So what's been really encouraging is that we're communities be much more creative in recent years of how they direct funds to their trust. It is true that CPA is the most common funding source for trusts. About 77% of our housing trusts also have the Community Preservation Act in their community. So it's a common source, but it's by no means a given necessarily in every community, and it's certainly not the only funding source. We also have communities that have inclusionary zoning, and their bylaw may allow an in lieu of payment, and those funds are oftentimes directed to their housing trust. Swampscott is an example of that. We have communities that have transferred free cash, so funds from their general fund to their housing trust. Brookline and Truro are examples of communities that do that. We have some communities that may use income from tax title sales to support their trust, or like Chelsea, they've actually transferred tax title properties to their housing trust to dispose of for affordable housing. We have one community on the Cape that has a cell phone tower, and the income from the lease payments are directed to their trust. It's a small amount, but it still is some funds. There may be special bylaw or ordinance payments that could be directed to the trust. We have a community that our first community that we know of that has passed a municipal bond to support their trust. So in Medfield, they created a trust, and then they bonded $1 million, and they don't have the Community Preservation Act, so they bonded against their general fund to help seed their affordable housing trust. We have the first community that we know of that has passed a tax override to support their trust. That's Orleans on the Cape, has passed a $275,000 tax override that they are seen as a permanent tax override. So as far as I know, they're the only trust that's been able to access a line of credit because of this funding source that they have. We've had some communities that have negotiated developer fees that have gone towards their trust. You just want to be cautious about how you do this. In this particular community that I'm thinking of, it was a local developer that was developing homeownership units through Chapter 40B, and they negotiated that out of the market rate condos that $10,000 would be contributed to the community, and they directed it to their housing trust. And then we have some communities that are using short-term rental fees for housing. So Gloucester and Brewster are using some of those fees towards their housing, affordable housing. And you are likely aware that there's legislation pending around real estate transfer fees. So individual communities have filed, as well as a broader enabling legislation that would be statewide. And then the marijuana tax. So some communities are considering, at least have been talking about, perhaps some of the funds from this tax could be directed towards affordable housing. And donations are always an option as well, either cash or land or building. So the good news is that while CPA is the most common, that there are a lot of different ways that communities are trying to raise funds to support affordable housing in their community. So when trusts are new and they're getting started, we really encourage you to spend time understanding the housing needs in your community. So really starting with data. You have a housing production plan, and so there's a lot of data that's been collected, and we suggest that you start with that data and understanding it, and then working to set some priorities, because the housing needs in all of our communities are really extensive, and one board with volunteers can't possibly address all of them. So really work on understanding the needs and then prioritizing what you're going to be focusing on. And you could, if there's a particular need that you really want to address, you could create a benchmark for that. So for example, Somerville's Housing Trust has determined that they want a certain percentage of their funds to go towards the lowest income households in the community. So it's just a benchmark that they create for themselves. And it also sends a message to entities that may want some of their funds that their trust really wants to be serving the needs of the lowest income households in the community. You don't have to create a benchmark. You could if there was a particular need you wanted to address. So familiarize yourself with your local housing needs. You have this plan. You have a lot of data. I would suggest that you really spend some time to read through your plan, or at least the key sections, analyzing the data and some of the suggestions made in your production plan. Some of you may have been involved in the creation of this. And then there are other resources that you can use as well, just to better understand what's happening in Shrewsbury. And Datatown is a website that MHP has put together. It has data points for all 351 communities in the state. There's also a tool where you can compare communities. So if there are communities that Shrewsbury compares itself against, you can put the multiple communities in to see housing type and the diversity of housing type in your community versus others, if that's relevant. On the right, you can see the cost burden of homeowners versus renters. And what's typical in most communities is that renters tend to be more cost burdened than homeowners. So these kind of basic data points can help inform your thinking around your role in the community. We suggest that you then create a mission statement. So as a board, that you work to make a simple, succinct sentence or two around the role that you see, your role in the community, how you see your role in the community. I just pulled a couple off websites. On the left is Grafton, and what I appreciate about Grafton's is that they added in it that they will also be educating and advocating for affordable housing in the community. On the right-hand side, Amherst, I appreciate with Amherst that they're reiterating that they're a municipal board and that they're working in concert with the community to implement identified priorities. So whatever it is for Shrewsbury, I would suggest that you take some time to create a mission statement so that you're on the same page and so that you have a way to articulate to the community how you see your role. And then we suggest that you take some time, and this can be, in some communities, it could be several months, but that you take some time to create guidelines or goals or to create a strategic plan, whatever form makes sense to you. It depends on the community, how much planning you've already done, how much support you have by staff. So whether it's kind of an internal process or whether you feel like you need to hire a consultant. But we've seen a lot of communities where the trust tries to just jump in, and typically they end up spinning their wheels because the needs are really great and they have a hard time figuring out where to start. We really suggest that instead of just jumping in, that you take some time to do some planning, some groundwork effort to understand the needs in the community and then decide what are the things you're going to be focusing on. So on the left is Beverly, and I can send the link to Beverly's, but they created, they appointed their trustees, they finished an update to their housing needs analysis, and then using that, they created eligible activities, decided the things that they really want to be funded based on the needs that came out of their plan. And then they had some funds in their account. They established these activities and general guidelines for how they were going to operate as a trust. And then at the end of the year, so they took several months to do this process. At the end of the year, they released a NOFA, a Notice of Funds Available. And it was the next year where they actually allocated funds. So they spent a good chunk of time doing this groundwork and really rooting themselves in a process before they actually jumped into funding. And it's the kind of process that I'm suggesting that communities spend time to do. On the right, Amherst hired a consultant. They decided to do a 5-year plan. Some communities do that. It's by no means something that you need to do. And 5 years can be a long time out. So it could be a more simple process like Beverly's. Or in Brewster, they established a mission statement. They then created goals and priority initiatives. So it was an in-house process that they did. And then they had a housing forum, open housing forum, where they invited folks in the community to learn about how the trust was identifying its role and the goals that they were creating, and just to get some feedback from the community that they could incorporate into their efforts. So then to move all this forward, of course, not only does it take a committee members, trustees that can really participate, but really having a chairperson that can help move things forward. And then in our perspective, in our experience, the trusts that are able to be the most effective typically have some sort of paid support staff, paid staff support. So either administrative, so helping with some of the logistics and the administrative work and minutes and communication between boards, scheduling meetings, and or perhaps more technical experience. So if there's a program that the trust wants to support, helping to manage a program, or technical support around analyzing different sites with an eye towards affordable housing development, either municipal sites or privately owned sites. So these, from our perspective, are the three key. And this kind of a board, it really needs to be a working board where trustees really need to be willing to take pieces of the work and really engage in the topic. And affordable housing is complex, so there is a lot to learn. If you have multiple entities, multiple boards that are working on pieces of affordable housing in Shrewsbury, we would suggest that early on you have conversations around roles so that there isn't confusion, there isn't stepping on each other's toes. This is just an example in Manchester about how they did this process, where on the left, they established different housing strategies. They determined ones that were shorter term versus longer term. And on the right-hand side, they identified the lead board or boards to help with accountability and also just so there's clarity of roles. So we would suggest that if you do have different entities that are working on affordable housing, maybe a housing authority, maybe a nonprofit, maybe, I don't know if you have a housing partnership, I can't remember. The trust, if you do have different entities, we would suggest you have a conversation early on about your roles. And then be really as transparent as you can about the work that you're doing, about the ways that you're thinking about your role in the community. We probably all know that housing development in general, but affordable housing specifically, can be very controversial, unfortunately, in our communities. So don't make it difficult for people to understand what your role is, what you're working on, what you're funding. So report back to whatever boards are identified as important in Shrewsbury. When you do invest in a fund, in a development or in a program, promote that, make it known to the community, and with your web page, use that as much as you can. Add your bylaw, a link to your bylaw, add a link to anything that you might be funding. But just don't make it difficult for people in the community to understand what you're all about. And then you should spend a little bit of time of just determining your operating approach. So some of our affordable housing trusts just want to take in applications and then decide what they want to fund, similar to our community preservation committees with communities that have CPA. Some communities, their trusts really want to be initiators. So what we saw during the pandemic is that in many of our communities, it was really the housing trust that initiated emergency rent assistance, local emergency rent assistance programs. We also are seeing more housing trusts be engaged in disposing of municipal land for affordable housing development. So whether sometimes the site is actually transferred to the trust, and then the trust manages the pre-development and the writing a request for proposals. In other cases, the trust is just actively engaged in the process. And then in some of our communities, the trust really works on being an advocate for affordable housing. And a lot of our communities do each of these things or a combination. So we would suggest that you have conversation early, again, as you're doing your groundwork of establishing how is your trust going to operate, and then being clear about that in the community. So I'm going to transfer to just examples of the kinds of things that you could help fund. But if there are any questions before we move on, if anyone wants to raise your hand, I'm happy to pause for a minute. Oh, so I'm just going to continue on, and feel free to interrupt me if you'd like. So I use the verbs that we see with the Community Preservation Act: acquire, create, preserve, support, because the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust statute was modified a few years ago to allow all of the eligible activities under community housing for an affordable housing trust as well. So these statutes are now in line that everything that's allowable for community housing under CPA is allowable for the trust. So one example of acquire is here in Barnstable, this apartment complex where just a portion of the units were affordable. I believe this development was originally permitted under Chapter 40B. In in 2011, a nonprofit organization was able to use local funds to buy the entire development. They used the local funds to leverage other funds to buy the entire apartment complex. And now almost all of the units are affordable in perpetuity. A few are market rate because there were some households that were not income qualified and they didn't want to displace anyone. But this is an example of using local funds. In this particular case, it was through the CPC, but this could have been trust funds, and it would have had the same kind of outcome. It would have allowed this nonprofit developer to acquire the entire site. And now they have almost all of these 124 units are affordable. So an example of using your local funds to acquire existing housing to create affordable housing. We have a variety of affordable housing trusts that manage these kind of small scale homeownership programs. They're sometimes called buy down programs because it's helping income qualified households purchase existing single family, typically single family, it could be a condo, but a home in the community. So I just picked out Sudbury's. Sudbury is a community that has a significant tear down problem where the more modest, more naturally affordable homes are torn down and a much larger home is built. And so their home preservation program is a way to preserve some of these smaller, more naturally affordable homes and allowing income qualified households earning up to 80% of the area median income to purchase the home. So their model is that they have a consultant that identifies homes that fit this kind of modest, like capes or ranch houses that are a little bit older, that they're coming on the market, and then they negotiate a sale price with the seller. They run a lottery to see households that are interested and qualified to purchase the home. And then at the time of sale, the trust puts in the difference between what makes the home affordable for a household earning 80% of the area median income and the negotiated sale price. So the trust puts in the difference of that at the time of sale. And the last that I heard, it was over $225,000. So these programs tend to be expensive. It takes a lot of subsidy per unit of housing, which is why this community and all the others that I know of don't typically add more than just a couple units in a year. But we do have several trusts that manage this kind of a program as a piece of their affordable housing strategy.
Charlie, one quick question. So on something like that, would there be a deed restriction?
Yes. So Sudbury works with the state under the local action unit program, and the universal deed rider, the state requires the universal deed rider is added to it. And then these units are added to the subsidized housing inventory for Sudbury. So that means that at resale, they have to continue to be affordable for households earning 80% of the area at median income.
Thank you.
Yep. We have many communities that are contributing funds. Their trusts are contributing funds towards development of new affordable housing. This is an example in Yarmouth on the Cape. And Yarmouth actually started by rezoning certain sections of Route 28 to allow multifamily housing by right. This development falls in that area. A private developer acquired this former motor lodge and then worked with the community to develop the 69 units of new affordable housing that came online right before the pandemic started. So it's 69 apartments, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom. They are affordable at 60% of the area at median income, and then a few at 30%. When you see those numbers, 60%, that is a hint that it has low income housing tax credits in the deal. And then their housing trust put in over $2 million, which comes out to $30,000 per unit. So with this particular development, not only because the community rezoned the area to allow multifamily housing, but also the community contributed a significant amount of local funds. This development was actually funded with state resources in the first round, which is really unusual because of the high competition for developments, but because of the strong local support, it's probably why the state funded it so quickly. So it's one example of creating, and then I'm going to give a couple where this was really community driven. This is a site in Westport. So the community spent actually several years of acquiring some sites, using their trust actually used some funds to acquire an adjacent parcel to allow access to the town-owned lots. They did some pre-development work, and then they put out a request for proposals. The nonprofit developer, the community builders, was chosen. And now they have 50 units of affordable apartments. Again, 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. It's 60% AMI, area median income. So again, it has low income housing tax credits in the deal. They do have 5 units that are reserved for 100% area median income. They use some Community Preservation Act funds, so that allows up to 100% AMI. And over the course of several years, the trust put in about $1 million, including acquisition, pre-development work, and then funds to the developer that they were able to then take to the state to show the local support for the development. And now they have a really beautiful development there. Another locally driven one was in Norwell, where the community had this former police station and they declared it surplus, and then they decided to transfer it to their housing trust. So the trust was the one that did some initial work on the site. They put together a request for proposals that they released. Nonprofit Metro West Collaborative Development responded and was chosen. And now they have 18 units of age-restricted senior rental housing, 1 and 2 bedrooms. They're affordable up to 100%, but most of them are at 80% of area median income. The development is on their subsidized housing inventory, and between their housing trust and their CPC, they put in a little bit over $1 million, and it's a really attractive building that they have there now in Norwell, but really very locally driven. And then we have a lot of examples of reusing existing buildings for affordable housing. Sometimes there's a historic component, but not always. In Middleborough, the shoe shop place, it had been a shoe factory, and a couple nonprofits were able to partner and redevelop it into 25 rental units. These are family housing, but that just means that it's not age restricted. So seniors can live in this housing. You just need to be income qualified. In the middle, in North Andover, that had been a nursing home, and a nonprofit that's actually Boston-based, NOAA, was able to acquire it and redevelop it into 42 units of rental housing. Again, non-age restricted, not age-restricted housing. And then on the right, we have many schools that have been redeveloped into market rate as well as affordable housing. So this is a very recent example in Swampscott. I think it's Macon School. I'm not actually sure how to say it. So now it's 38 units of age restricted, so senior housing in Swampscott. Sometimes this is a little bit less controversial of development, just because it's helping to bring an underutilized building back online. So for some communities, this can be a great way of increasing affordable housing. And then in many cases, the deed restrictions, the affordability restrictions on housing, affordable housing, are set to expire. It can be a reflection of the financing that was used to either create the housing in the first place or to refinance. And some of our housing trusts are paying attention to expiring it's usually called expiring use. So it's one thing that your trust, you might want to just pay attention to if you have any affordability restrictions that are expiring, and you might want to be a part of helping to extend that affordability. In Amherst, there's this very large apartment complex where 41 units had been affordable, and the financing was set to expire. The restrictions were set to expire, and the community was really anxious about this because, as you likely know, Amherst has a very intense rental market with all the universities, particularly UMass, and the pressure that puts on their rental housing market. They don't want to lose these affordable units, and they reached out to MHP. We did some initial work with them, and it was ultimately decided that the community reached out to Beacon Communities, so a large developer that has extensive experience with multifamily housing, affordable housing, Chapter 40B housing. And Beacon agreed to actually negotiate with the owner who did not want to extend the affordability. Beacon was able to acquire it, but using some local funds. So their Community Preservation Committee recommended bonding $1.25 million, and the community agreed. So most trusts would not be able to bond because trusts don't have the kind of income that a CPC has. So it may not sound like the best example, but a lot of communities don't have that amount of cash necessarily sitting in their trust. So it's a way that a trust can be partnering with the CPC to help it to extend affordability in units that might be set to expire. And then other things that have been seen as allowable and that communities have used their CPA funds for that now trusts can also use funds for is some pre-development work. If you have a municipal site that you're interested in seeing developed as affordable housing, you could potentially fund some pre-development work, determining the feasibility, updating housing plans, your housing production plan the next time that you're updating it. And rental housing is explicitly allowed, and many trusts have invested in emergency rent assistance. A couple of other examples of how different trusts are working or things that they're doing. In Medfield, they did bond $1 million to seed their trust, but the last that I heard, which was just about a year ago, they still had not used those funds because the trust has really seen its role. It's really taken the role of an advocate. And so they have actually been focusing on advocating for proposals in town, development proposals that include affordable units. So their trust will work towards advocating for those proposals, seeing them as an asset and a benefit to the community without having to use any funds to do it because they are developments that are already being proposed. And in Amherst, just one of their kind of public relations activities is that I'm not quite sure what's happened with the pandemic, but pre-pandemic, they were doing an annual public hearing. So the trust would take either a development, a site that they were working on, or a proposal, an idea that they had, they would bring it to a public forum. So similar to how many community preservation committees will have an annual public hearing, their trust took this similar kind of initiative to help with the conversation with the community and allow feedback and input from the community. So just a couple other ways that trusts are operating. And to wrap it up and to get to questions, if you have any, or conversation, just we really suggest that you really consider your local infrastructure, the needs that you have, the resources that already exist in Shrewsbury, and to really develop goals that reflect the needs that are identified in your housing production plan. It's easy in some communities to want to take the path of least resistance because affordable housing can be so controversial. We really urge you to ground your efforts in the data of really what the needs are in the community and not just in assumptions about what may be. And then remember that you're a volunteer board, be real about your capacity, try to identify a few things to do well, and don't spread yourself too thin. We have a lot of online resources for you from Datatown, the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Guidebook. We have the Housing Toolbox that even has a search function. So if there's certain things around affordable housing that you're interested in, you can just put that in the search function. We also have, now that during the pandemic, we've been taping all of our trainings. So we have a lot of different trainings online as well that might be helpful for you. And then we want to be a resource, and this is my information. Bernie has the PDF of this and he can send it out. You can post it. Feel free to reach out to me with any other questions.
Thank you, Shelley. That's a lot to digest. And, I've been in the affordable housing industry for 30 years and, I'm sitting here and, taking down a lot of notes myself. So I know that, we have a lot of work ahead of us. And, from, what I hear or what I take is that we have to be very methodical and, making sure that we do gather all of the data and have a realistic timeline as we process this. We can't just go ahead and process and just move forward with this without, taking all of the necessary steps that we need to. Is there anyone that has any questions? I didn't see anything pop up here on the side, but
Here you go.
yes, Mo.
I was wondering if I could ask Shelley, when there's an affordable trust in a community and you have the Community Preservation Act, how do the CPCs usually operate? Do they operate more as a funding mechanism, or do they get active in trying to do something with affordable housing on their own? I'm just wondering about coordination.
Yep. So in some communities, we have communities like Cambridge and Somerville, where their CPC transfers a significant amount of their funds every year to their Affordable Housing Trust. And they really see the Affordable Housing Trust as basically the community housing arm of the CPC. So Cambridge actually transfers 80% of their CPA funds every year to their trust. So the majority of their funds go to housing. In Somerville, it's about 45% of their CPA funds are transferred to their trust every year. And then in some communities like Grafton, they typically transfer about 10%, the basic 10% to their housing trust. Perhaps, unfortunately, most communities, most CPCs require the trust to file an application and to explain why they want the funds, similar to every other applicant. So it really depends on the community and the relationship between the trust and the CPC. In most cases, the trust would apply for funds. In some communities, the CPC really wants the trust to be specific about exactly what they're using the funds for. In some communities, the CPC and the community are more willing to transfer, say, 200,000 or 500,000. I don't know how much your community is building up, but a bigger chunk so that the trust has funds to be able to move nimbly if a development or something comes up. So it really just depends on the community.
Well, do the CPCs, do they actually get involved themselves with trying to go out and create affordable housing?
No, they typically just respond to proposals that they might receive.
Okay.
So that is a big difference, that a trusts are in the position to be able to be more proactive. And part of that is because the trust is just focused on affordable housing, whereas the CPC has 4 different things: historic preservation, open space, recreation, and affordable housing. And on a CPC, there's only, by statute, one person that's housing related, a representative of the Housing Authority.
Mm-hmm.
Communities have additional housing people on their CPC, but by statute, only one person is affiliated with affordable housing. The hope is that with the trust, that this is a group of people that are focused solely on affordable housing, that you have more time then to really dig into what that means and how to support affordable housing locally.
So can I just, one last question related to this. So maybe after our trust gets a little clearer vision on what it thinks it would like to do,
Mm-hmm.
would it be a good idea to have a joint meeting with the CPC and maybe the Board of Selectmen, so everybody has a common understanding of what each is going to do? I mean, is that typically how they start off?
So I think that would be a fantastic idea. And I have oftentimes suggested in communities of having perhaps even once a year joint meetings, if that's feasible in the community, just so that there's good communication and openness. You definitely want to be open with your CPC about the plans that you're making, how you're thinking to move forward. And in some communities, the CPC wants to know what your plans are, how you're expecting to use funds. You definitely want to keep the CPC engaged with, as you in terms of educating them around the housing needs in the community. When you do begin to update your housing production plan, which will come before you know it, you want to make sure that they're at the table, that the select board is engaged, that people are really understanding the housing needs in the community, so that it's not a surprise when you go to ask for funds, that they're understanding what the needs are and how you're thinking about your role. Absolutely engage them, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Kristen has a question.
Thank you. More two comments than questions, but I think we're in a really unique situation that will actually benefit us. Our CPC actually just got started over the summer, and they participated in a CPC training with the Community Preservation Coalition, which talked about all of the buckets. Bernie, I'd urge us to forward that training to the Housing Trust as well for them to see the training that we went through for CPC, because I think it dovetails. And I know the CPC is kind of doing their roadshow now with various boards and commissions, and will be having their public forum and creating their priority plan. So I think we as a trust should stay very close to that and understand where they're going. It is up to us to actually make those applications to the CPC committee, which I think will be coming out in the fall then for funding at the spring town meeting. So just wanted to say that we're in a very unique situation, that we're kind of marching at the same time as the CPC, and hopefully can drive in the same direction when it comes to affordable housing. The other thing is we're positioned well, that we actually already have funds in our trust fund, because we have had inclusionary zoning since 2006, and we have almost $1 million in that. So how we can leverage that and plan. But I think as Hector opened up with after Shelley's presentation, as if we can be as methodical as possible. We have professional planning staff assisting us now. Shelley, we would love to use you as a resource, and I think I would like to do a lot more research on the other municipalities and how they went, and use them as a resource as well. So thank you so much for the really informative presentation. I look forward to digging into it further.
Kristen, are you on the CPC?
I am not. So I'm the assistant town manager here in Shrewsbury. So I am the delegate of the town manager on the Affordable Housing Trust, but I oversee the Community Development and Health and Human Services Department for the town of Shrewsbury, and keep a close eye on it.
Okay, yeah. And you know, I meant to put some examples where the funding, the amount of local funds contributed wasn't so high, because it can be intimidating. We have many developments where the local funds are 200,000 or 300,000, and still have leveraged 50 units of housing or 60 units of housing. So it's not just the $1 million tag. It's there's still a lot that your community could do with $1 million. So I meant to put in a couple that were not quite as high, like the Middleborough, where it's the shoe shop, where it's 25 units of rental housing. That community only put in $25,000 or $30,000. They were a new CPA community. They didn't have a lot of local resources. It still was a contribution that the developer was able to use to get the resources that they needed to build redevelop the whole site. So I'm sorry that I didn't put in a couple that weren't quite such big tickets.
No, thank you. Are there any other questions?
Mr. Cruz, we also have our Assistant Town Manager of Administration and Finance and our Town Treasurer on the line, just to understand funding. I don't know if you'd entertain any questions from them, or if they had any questions, but just to want to recognize that they were on the line.
Sure. Anyone else that's on the line, right? Because I only can see just a couple on the box here that has any questions.
No, I don't have any questions. This is Mary Thompson, but thank you, Kristen.
Well,
I'm all
thank
set
you,
as well.
Shelley.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I know that we will be in touch. There's a lot of information. I know we're just starting the process.
Yep.
But, you know, as, you know, the meetings progress, I know that there will be a lot of questions coming up, and I'm sure that we will be in contact and, you know, looking for some support, either technical or support from MHP.
Fantastic. And so Bernie does have the PDF of the slides, and it has my information. So feel free to reach out. And I also will just email Bernie links to some of the trainings that we have on the Housing Toolbox, specifically one on kind kind of the nuts and bolts of affordable housing finance. To give you, if you're interested, it's an hour and 15 minutes. If you're interested in just learning a little bit more about how deals are put together. And then we have another one where it's a nonprofit developer giving the developer perspective of what it takes to put a deal together. So balancing the community interest, the site specific challenges, as well as the funders, the state and bank kind of requirements. So there are a couple, those two may help you as you're trying to learn more, those of you who are trying to learn more around affordable housing. So I'll send those to Bernie, he can forward them to you. But it was great to be with you tonight, and I'm really excited that you're moving forward in this way. I know it's a lot of work, but it's fantastic that you're moving this in this direction.
Great. No, thank you very much.
Yeah. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ooh, that was a lot.
Yes,
and
it
one
was.
that, you know, as I said, one that's been doing this for quite a while, more on the management side, but the development side, there are a lot of moving pieces, a lot of information that we have to digest, we have to dive into, and you know, determine, you know, what's the best course that we can take as a group. So the meeting on March 2nd, you know, I'll put together some notes, and I will reach out to Bernie and figure out, you know, what we can, you know, put together so that we can have some for discussion purposes and on our next meeting. But there's a lot there. I would love to get, you know, feedback as well, you know, after you digest this, and hopefully, you know, we'll have a very good conversation starting point, and as we try to, you know, put this together.
Yep.
Is there any other business or new business that anyone needs to bring up or discuss? No. So we, at our December meeting, we did put on the calendar, or agreed, at March 2nd will be our next meeting. Hopefully that still works for everyone.
Mhm.
And you know, looking forward to seeing everyone. Hopefully I don't know, are we going to do it in person, or is it going to be virtual?
So we're monitoring the data. The data is starting to look better. So we
Mhm.
will let people know probably about 2 weeks in advance of the meeting, but hopefully be back in person.
Yeah, I love that. You know, I'm rooting for in person, but I understand if we have to, you know, do it virtual. But looking forward to seeing everyone then on March 2nd, and working closely with you in this on this committee.
Great.
Great. So can, if there's nothing else, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye. You need a roll
Aye.
call? Hey.
Yeah, we do need
Do
a
we-
roll call to finish out. Yep.
To finish out?
Yep.
Okay. And that's just for the motion, it's just for the vote?
The vote.
Yeah.
Yep.
For the vote? Okay, so Hector Cruz, yes. Beth?
Aye.
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Kristen?
Yes.
Mo?
Yes.
So moved.
Great.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank
Take
you.
care,
Thank you.
everybody.
Have a good evening.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye.
Bye.